Good morning, it's August 28th, a Monday, and we got some big news. Let's go ahead and get right into it. This forecast is going to be focusing mainly on the impacts of Idalia because I don't have a ton of time this morning. However, I will have a more detailed update later on today. So here is Idalia, and we are looking at wind sustained at 65 miles an hour, and that is interesting because we are getting pretty close to this storm being a hurricane, and it will happen today. And it's moving finally. It's moving north at 7 miles an hour. Also, Franklin is now really rocking with winds of 115 miles an hour, and that is something to watch out for if you're in Bermuda. However, today, at least this morning, my focus is going to be on Idalia because, once again, a little short on time. So let's take a look at the visible satellite, and you can see that convection is really just going with this. And this was definitely looking pretty impressive last night. And, it's still early in the morning, so, we can take a look at the infrared, and you can just really see that convection going, and this is looking more like a hurricane, and that's really concerning. And the biggest story with this is that the National Hurricane Center has upgraded their forecast. So you take a look right now at the track, at the cone, and it has this with a big M right here, making landfall as a major hurricane category 3. It doesn't matter whether it's a 3, 4, or 5, a major hurricane. The reason why, it says M and major, and why we say the word major and focus on that so much is, as the storm gets closer to the coast, it can intensify. So, you might expect a 3 and you end up with a 4 or 5. So, in category 3 is when you really start to see those huge impacts. And you see, that doesn't mean that category 1 and 2 hurricanes aren't impactful and deadly. They are. However, category 3 and above is kind of a next level. So this is a big upgrade. Unfortunately, it's not one that I wasn't expecting. The hurricane right now, or the hurricane, Idalia, the tropical storm, is over really deep, warm water. And it's going to move north into warm water. So there's really not much in terms of, the thermodynamics there that are going to weaken it, and the dry air and the shear that we were hoping to do something really doesn't look like that's going to be the case too much. And at this point, you just need to consider the impacts. Now, we've got tropical storm warnings right now on the Yucatan coast here. You can also see that little black line. That's the movement over the last, I would say, 24 to 48 hours. That's the past track, and you can see that Idalia has just been kind of meandering here and sitting over this really warm, deep water, and that's why it's strengthening so quickly. And then we've got a hurricane warning for western Cuba, and we've got basically a situation where we may see rapid intensification as the storm moves north, and that's really concerning, but it's not unusual. It happens a lot in the Gulf. And basically, if you're in the Big Bend area of Florida, that's where the likely landfall is. Just a reminder, these kind of edges of the cone here, that's the margin of error. And this is the margin of error for the center of the storm. So even if you're outside of the cone, you're still going to feel the impacts of this. And, we're looking at a Big Bend landfall, but this is going to have some major impacts on Tampa. It's going to have some major impacts across the entire west coast of Florida, even down into, the southwest Florida coast, where you'll see some storm surge moving in. So we're going to watch this closely. And I know after Ian made that turn, hit Fort Myers, a lot of folks are really nervous about this storm. And I say just keep watching the forecast because, you just need to make sure you have your hurricane preparations underway. Make sure that you've got, you take a look at your emergency kit, see if you're missing anything. And if you're in an area where evacuation is going to be necessary, if you're along the coast, if you're in a surge prone area, review those evacuation routes and get ready to get out. That's my advice to you across Florida's west coast, especially the Big Bend area. So that's what we're looking at. Let's talk about surge really quickly. And once again, I'm focusing more on the impacts rather than the actual forecast of the storm, and I'll have a more detailed update later today. But you can see up to 11 feet of storm surge in the Bend area from the Osceola River into the Chassahowitzka. I hope I'm saying that right. And then, even down through Longboat Key, 4 to 7 feet. I love Longboat Key, by the way. So, Tampa area too, 4 to 7 feet of surge. Yeah, that's 4 to 7. Sorry, I can't read. And, down into Southwest Florida, 3 to 5 in some spots like Inglewood, and then 2 to 4 feet down toward the Fort Myers area into Chokoloskee. And basically, even if this storm continues that track into the Big Bend, which is the most likely track at this point, you're still going to see some impacts along the southwest coast in terms of a little bit of surge at least. So you just need to really be monitoring this. And another thing we're going to see too as the storm moves inland, it's going to be a big wind and rain threat, especially through, Savannah, Charleston. And then what happens is this storm moves back out to, into the ocean, likely staying a tropical storm. And, we'll see what happens with this. But there's going to be some big inland impacts too in terms of rain. So, this orange here is 6 to 10 inches. You're likely going to see this really increase, but you're likely to see some pretty massive inland flooding with this as well. And a lot of that's going to depend on the storm speed after it makes landfall. If it slows down in any way, then you can see some really big flooding issues. And that was the case with Harvey, where Harvey stalled over Houston basically, and just produced a ton of rain. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the near future. I'm going to back this up. And this is, our high resolution models. And you can see Idalia kind of glancing by the west coast of Cuba, becoming a hurricane, really getting that eye wall formed and just becoming pretty powerful as it moves ashore. And once again, the Big Bend region has been kind of, where these models have been placing it. That could change. But what we have is high pressure here. We've got a low that's kind of going to pull this up to the north. We're already seeing that northward motion with this. So the biggest thing you need to know right now is that this is going to become a powerful storm, a major hurricane making landfall, most likely in the Big Bend, but everyone on the west coast of Florida needs to be paying close attention to this. Make your hurricane plans. Take a look at your evacuation route, gather your important documents, and just make sure you're ready for this, because this is likely going to be a pretty big deal for a pretty good chunk of Florida, and also parts of Georgia, the Carolinas, depending on the track as it moves inland. So take care. I will be back later today with another update.